Good evening. Welcome to this IBC keynote forum on the creation, consumption and corruption, the new architecture of news. We have a splendid panel we've put together for you tonight. We're going to hear from them in a moment. They'll make some initial presentations and we'll then get a conversation going between them, and then we'll throw it open to you, the audience, and we'll finish. I think we're scheduled to go on till 18:25. We will certainly finish no later than that. Our panel tonight, starting on the left, is Claudia. She's Chief Business Officer and CFO at Reuters. Thomson Reuters is the name of the company. Reuters is the news brand, still famous old news brand. Will Lewis is Chief Executive of Dow Jones, which of course includes the Wall Street Journal. Deborah Raynor, we thank for coming in at the last minute. Tony Maddox of CNN, the MD of CNN International, was down to do this, but he has had to stay in the United States because of the fallout from the two hurricanes that have hit America, particularly the latest one. So Deborah's come in at the last minute. She is SVP of International Newsgathering, both TV and digital at CNN International. Give our panel a round of applause for being here with us tonight. So let's hear, first of all, for about 5, 6, 7 minutes at the most from our panel, and then we'll get the conversation going. Deborah, who has come in at the last minute, is also first up, just to make it doubly difficult for you. So let me hand over to Deborah Raynor of CNN International. Deborah, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. Well, I was here last year, and just looking back over the year, it has indeed been the most extraordinary year. I think everyone will agree. I'll get this out of the way right at the top, the new US administration it has been challenging, well, it's been challenging all around, but it's been extremely challenging to mainstream media organizations, not just in the US, where we're surprised often hourly, not just daily, and responding to those challenges. But obviously, I run international news, and I'm not in the White House press corps or in our Washington bureau, but there's tremendous impact around the world from this administration to which we've had to respond. So big stories, obviously, like the Russia story, Russia investigation, Mexico, China, TPP, North Korea, quite obviously, interventions or discussions around Syria. One of the very first stories, the travel ban, had huge global ramifications. So the speed and flexibility with which we've had to respond and recalibrate there, has made this year feel like it just felt like a runaway train sometimes. But thankfully, I think this is such is the fascination with this story that it's really given us a time to recalibrate and hold ourselves to the highest standards. And I think our audiences have demonstrably turned to serious, reliable, and professional journalism. At conferences some time ago, it's, what about social media? What is the role of the journalist? I think that's become eminently clear. And we'll go on to discuss that. And against this backdrop as well, I mean, I would just say, there have been many more challenging stories that aren't just around the new US administration, obviously. There's the Brexit story in the UK. There's the ongoing battle against ISIS, which, these have tested us because they're dangerous, because they're complex, because of new technologies, because of audiences are able to engage in a way, we face trolling, and most particularly emerged in all this extreme challenge has been the arrival, or not just the arrival, but the prominence of fake news, which I know Andrew in this panel will want to be discussing at further length as we go through. But fake news, everything from what I call real fake news, which is the kids and the mafia in Macedonia, who are churning out fake news for commercial gain only, which is harmful, and it's perpetrated and amplified by social media. But in some ways, to me, there is not easy to solve, but it is easier than what is perhaps more pernicious, which is political manipulation of news and malign fake news, which is something that concerns greatly even when someone like Aung San Suu Kyi, so revered in the last few days, has called out fake news on the Rohingya, which, as you know, is a huge humanitarian disaster. So we'll be discussing those challenges. We face them. We aim to call it out when we see fake news. There's been much discussion about what we should do about it, whether there should be sanctions against or legislation against the social media companies that distribute it, where the accountability lies, what we can do about it. Certainly that's, we've put a lot of work into it, as a lot of organizations have. Industry-wise, we've been challenged over the past year, not the past year, past several years, as has everybody, with the commercially TV versus digital, which I think Claudia could speak to better than I, but I'm fortunate to be head of international news gathering for both TV and digital. So to speak to the architecture piece of this, news gathering on the ground, we're having to react faster, as I said. Social media and the smartphone in the hands of our consumers means we have to respond incredibly quickly. But we have, we've recalibrated. Technically, we're nimbler. There are many engineers here. We're always pushing you. We need to be faster, 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 faster in the gathering, faster in the delivery. So that's we've all had to invest in, retrain in, and review constantly our technical setups. So our convergence with digital, I think, has been absolute at CNN. We are, we're not just a cable broadcast news company, as many people may have thought of us in the past. We're genuinely a multimedia organization now, and I think that's an ongoing process. It means that we have to cater for millennials and tell stories in a different way, but I think all of this has, audience hunger for speed, for context, for different platforms, for different means of consumption that have emerged, have brought us back to basics in a way. I was at a Future of News conference and I was thinking, future, although we're in such a dramatically changing environment, there is nothing more important right now from a journalistic point of view than really solid, on the ground journalism, and the audiences are turning to it. The audiences that want that are turning to it in droves, and we're seeing the numbers go up. And we've benefited in that way. It's almost a time to, while we move forward with all different audience research and platforms and technology, to journalistically really go back to basics. And that's how we counter fake news, and that's how we grow or keep our audiences.
Thank you,
those are my
Deborah.
Observations for the past year.
I thought you had a video to show us.
Sorry?
Have you got a video?
Well, I have. I was just a clip from Macedonia, which I think is quite startling if people haven't seen it. We published yesterday a short documentary on one of our digital platforms and on air about Macedonia, if you would like to just show it.
Yeah, let's run that now.
Yeah,
let's have a look at that.
These are the kids that, or they're not kids, some of them it's very organized, that are making money out of fake news.
What makes a good, clickable story, in your opinion?
So you need to have an interesting topic. Whatever Donald Trump is doing, it's interesting for everyone. Even in my country, everything he said, it's worth listening. When you have million fans, if you post something, even if it's not interesting, a lot of them will open it just to see what it is, and you will get money.
You don't know if it's true or not?
I don't know, and I don't care.
Right.
Because the people are reading. I can tell you how much money I have earned in one day. Maybe it was around $2,000, $2,500 at one day. For this kind of money to earning per day, you need to have maybe a fan page more than 500,000 people.
Fascinating. We're going to come back to some of the issues that Deborah raised in a moment. But let's hear now from the Chief Executive of Dow Jones, Will Lewis.
Thanks very much. I'm going to echo and hopefully amplify the positive tone because actually, we're not without our challenges in each of our different bits of this industry, but actually, what a fantastic time to be in journalism. The stories are just outstanding, very challenging to handle, but it's just an extraordinary time in journalism. And also, it's been, for some of us, an extraordinarily good time from a business sense as well. So I'm going to strike an unashamedly positive tone, while obviously being mindful of issues such as fake news. And for us at Dow Jones, which is the home to, as Andrew said, the Wall Street Journal, the world's greatest newspaper, but also magazines like Barron's, MarketWatch, Financial News, and a host of other businesses, we think that we found a model, a sustainable, profitable model, that has diversified revenue streams and also is majority digital revenues. So we've worked really hard to get to that place, and despite all of the turbulence over the last 3-4 years in particular, we think we have found a way forward. And let me just tell you why that is the case. So about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, we set a target of 3 million members, as we call them, not subscribers, members of Dow Jones, when we were at 2 million. And we are hurtling towards that target of 3 million. We're about 2.8 million now. And that includes the highest ever number of Wall Street Journal subscribers or members in our history. Now, most of those are digital, but they're paying good money. They're paying pretty much the same or more money as you would do for print or a print-digital combination. And that's a moment of great joy for us at our organization. We're up almost 250,000 year on year. Part of that is the so-called Trump bump, but there are a host of other factors as well, because as fake news swirls around, people are flocking to quality. There is a flight to quality, and this is something that's tremendously exciting and heartening as someone who's been in the newspaper industry for all of his working life. The result of that membership drive means that that is now our -- revenue stream. When I started this job, it was number 3, advertising was number 1, and it's now the most important single membership drive, revenue line. The second bit of optimism is we've also worked very hard to invest in data. And that's just not obviously using data to make better business decisions, but also to sell data packages. And it turns out there's a mini boom going on in machine-ready content that can be used by machines. Everyone's got a data scientist now, if not several of them, and they need feeding. They need feeding with machine-ready content. We have that. We've invested in that. We've got it through our own products called Factiva that many of you will know, use, and be involved with. But we've also launched a content as a platform called Dow Jones DNA, where you can and other customers can plug in their own systems to our content and help make better decisions as a result of that. And there is a boom going on in that data world, which is very, very exciting. So there's another very strong revenue stream, which is selling data in ways that customers actually want it. And the third is advertising. Now, advertising, particularly print advertising, has obviously been declining and continues to decline. But that doesn't mean to say that companies and other governments and institutions have given up wanting to communicate with the world. So there is also a revolution going on in advertising where companies are wanting to tell their story across a host of different platforms. That has meant that we've had to go through some profound change at Dow Jones and the Wall Street Journal to speak to that. But it's something that we have done and continue to do. And once you've made that leap to a more profound relationship with those advertisers, those relationships become much more intense, much more creative, and much more long-term. And while the margin is therefore come down a bit, it is actually much more valuable business, long-term business for the company as a whole. So for 3 very strong reasons for us, particularly at Dow Jones and the Wall Street Journal, to be really quite cheerful. Now, a 4th reason I'll give you is that we've done this without any blooming help at all from those major players in the digital ecosystem. They have loaded the bases against all of us for years and years, and it's been outrageous. And a lot of us have spoken about this for some time and got absolutely nowhere, right? Now, what's another very good reason for being optimistic is that there's really quite significant signs of change, particularly at Google, potentially at Facebook, and perhaps elsewhere at Apple and Amazon. And if this happens, and you'll have seen the news earlier this week that Google are looking like they're going to voluntarily scrap the rules around first click free, so that the apartheid system, which means that content like our content can't be found on Google and Google News, is finally got rid of. And they finally work out that not all news is equal. The news that that guy you saw there is creating is not the same as a Wall Street Journal reporter is creating, and that therefore the algorithm will actually change. If that does actually happen, that's extremely significant for everyone involved in the news business. And it could ensure that even the Neanderthals in our industry who have simply relied only on digital advertising do then make the leap to getting in some subscription or membership revenues and are able not just to stay alive, but continue to invest in the journalism that is so vital. So a fourth reason for being fantastically optimistic about our situation is that the digital ecosystem looks like it may be on the verge of quite dramatic and profound transformation that will be good for all of us in the room. Some closing remarks on fake news in particular. I think we're going to come on and talk about that. I will say three things. Firstly, fake news is not new. People have been making stuff up forever. What's new is the fact that there are companies that are prepared to amplify it and have no reason they see to do anything about it. And the things they seek to do about it are to do some sort of fact-checking thing with kids in their that they recruit off the street. Well, let me tell you, fact-checking is what we do for a living. It's what we have done for 130 years. It's what costs us millions of dollars to invest in our newsroom. Fact-checking is what we do. And until there is a profound recognition that not all news is equal and that some brands are better than other brands, and that media organizations that do adhere to a split between news, comment, and advertising, which a lot of our new competitors do not, and they fudge that, until there is a recognition of all of that, fake news and the pernicious effects that it has and the political consequences have will continue to pertain. And it is relying on all of us to be more coherently strong together in the face of this refusal of the digital ecosystem to do anything about it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Will. And let's hear now from the CEO of Reuters, Claudia Palmer.
Sure, thanks. I'll try to, again, to amplify a little bit or take it in a different direction. Reuters is, worth saying, Reuters is a bit unique. We stand a little bit apart from some of you are all from consumer brands. And while we do have a consumer offering such as Reuters TV, which is a very kind of modern way of looking at video and watching video news, we really are a business-to-business news organization. So we financial news to financial professionals through Thomson Reuters, and we sell, all of you here on this stage today are customers of ours, so thank you for that. But our job really, as we see it at Reuters, is to make sure that our news continues to be trusted. So we know that we are known for well-sourced, unbiased, fact-driven news. That's important to us. I think increasingly, in the world that is exciting yet challenging, as you've all outlined, is we feel that our role is to be an even stronger resource and to really think how we can partner with our customers, providing more content in more flexible ways very quickly. As you said, Deborah, it's about speed, and we know that people want more video from us. They might want it in, kind of raw, unedited form. They might want it packaged. They might want custom. So people want things differently. They want verified user-generated content. They want infographics that they can use. So our job really is to think about how do we offer more so that we can be more of a resource, given that newsrooms around the world are pressed for resources. So we've introduced, in May, we introduced a new offering called Reuters Connect that allows people to do that, to get more content more flexibly. And I think we see that as kind of our way. If newsrooms around the world thrive and continue to be excited about all the opportunities, that will help us continue to be successful as well. So we see ourselves really as kind of partners in this ecosystem to make sure that people know if it comes from Reuters, it can be trusted, we can put it out quickly, it's good to go. And that's really how we think about kind of our role and where we sit in the ecosystem. I like to think of us as kind of being, in a way, the, kind of wherever you, if you're a newsroom in Australia, you want our news on everywhere else in the world, and we're going to provide that to you. So again, it's thinking through, I think in a new world, in the world of news being disrupted, it's about partnerships, it's about thinking how we can collaborate and work quickly, and that's kind of the mindset that we have. I come from the music industry, so unlike you who've grown up in the news industry, I've spent more of my time in the music industry. Again, very similar, lots of digital disruption, content for free, lots of different places people can get news, and my learnings from that are that you want to really think about partnering. You can be fearful. Back in the day, we were fearful of iTunes. Spotify was something that we didn't even think would resonate, and those things are really important forces. So I apply that same approach as we think about how to commercialize news, is to constantly be thinking about who can we partner with and who might be a bit of a foe, but might become a friend, and let's experiment. So that's kind of the mindset that we take.
Okay, Claudia, thank you very much for that. That's the opening presentation, so let's go into some of the issues. Deborah, you talked a lot about the challenges that a news organization like CNN faces, but I would suggest that the bottom line, and I use the phrase advisedly, is that it's been good for business. You're making a ton of money out of the current architecture. $1 billion last year in profit.
It's very true to say that CNN is doing extremely well. Huge profits, huge rises in audience across all platforms, huge digital audience. I think only last week we had 33 million people visit the digital platform on Wednesday, but it wasn't to do with politics, it was to do with Irma. Yes, I mean, the new architecture, I would venture that we've succeeded in engaging and storytelling and remaining diverse and remaining global. Our response to it's not just about the US administration, but our response to that, I think, has been so successful because of the discipline that we've used, the fact-checking, the calling it out, and the, not being bullied or quieted on that front, but also because we have a huge presence in the US and because of our international footprint. And people have turned to or stayed with the brand, and that we have benefited in this time of immense challenge, and people have, it's been borne out in our ratings. But for sure,
you benefited in the ratings hugely during the primary campaign and then the presidential election campaign, and that massive spikes, which MSNBC and Fox had as well, was great for your bottom line. But not much of the money we're making ever went into actually investigating, for example, what Mr. Trump stood for and what the policies he was advocating, as opposed to simply covering the race. The race was good for ratings, but digging into the policies didn't happen.
I would disagree with that. I would say that we set up an investigative unit on the domestic side.
Not during the primaries.
Not during the primaries.
When it was most important, because that's when the country was choosing who the president was going to be.
Well, I would disagree. I think that people tuned in to see the race as well. It was obvious, on international, we actually started a new show, the State of America and the State of the Race.
But, in a sense, that's, I mean, I'll come to it in a minute.
Investment.
But that's my point. It was the state of the race.
Right.
You were making a ton of money, not you alone. Even CBS has boasted it. I mean, CBS reversed the old General Motors maxim. What's good for General Motors is good for America. CBS turned it into what's good for CBS is probably bad for America. But we're still making a lot of money out of it. But I guess my point is that since journalism, this kind of journalism, is now profitable. I mean, I was there on the day CNN was launched. It was launched on a shoestring. Today, it's making a ton of money. And yet the journalism was to cover it as a race. Who's up, who's down, who's winning, who's losing, who'll stay in the race, who'll leave the race. Almost none of it was right. We're not going to tell you about Mr. Trump's tax reform proposal. Or we're not going to tell you about Hillary Clinton's foreign policy, how it will differ from when she was Secretary of State, if it would.
Well,
The race was there, the substance wasn't.
Well, I would disagree, and I think a lot of the money, I mean, subsequently, we've invested heavily in an investigative unit, and we broke the news that there was a dossier that the then-elect president had been briefed on by the former head of the FBI that might contain evidence of Russia, him being beholden to the Russians. I mean, we broke that story. But I think, to go to your point, during the race, we spent an enormous amount of money on town halls where we actually went out. Another thing that's very important for us with audience engagement was we were out on the road in town halls talking to the people. I would say that vast amounts of money was spent in us traveling huge road shows for CNN, and we've actually, it was so successful that we've continued it.
All right. Will, it was good business for you as well, wasn't it?
What, the election?
Yeah. Well, the whole primary campaign, then the election, and subsequent. I mean, not just you, the digital subscriptions for the New York Times have gone through the roof, the Washington Post as well.
Yeah, well, I suppose what's most pleasing about it is that people that have come seem to have been attracted by our news is news mantra. So unlike the New York Times or the Washington Post, we haven't let our news pages become infected with commentary. Our mission is not to oust President Trump through our news pages. If you want our view on President Trump, we have a fantastic series of commentary pages, our editorial board, which is completely separate from news. So we have taken a very different approach from our legacy competitors. And I suppose what's most heartening is that the people that have been attracted to the Wall Street Journal as a result of that are very different types of readers, users, members than we've been used to getting. They skew much more female, they're much younger, they're from parts of America that and interestingly, they're pretty evenly split between Democrat and Republican. And the general feedback that we get through our call center, we get a huge amount of feedback from our customers, is almost exactly evenly split. 50% think we're being too soft on Donald Trump, and 50% think we're being too hard on Donald Trump. And that's, I suppose, as publisher of the Wall Street Journal, about as good a place as I would care to hope we could be.
It's the classic BBC defense, which never
no one's ever accused me of working for the BBC.
No,
Andrew,
I'm not accused. No, the BBC couldn't afford you. If the news pages are so pristine in the Wall Street Journal, why is the newsroom seething with unrest that you're giving Trump too easy a time?
I'm not sure that is the case, but I mean, I
Plenty
suppose
of evidence and emails doing the rounds to show it from journalists,
yeah,
both former and current.
Well, I suppose one judges from what their output is, and I tell you, there's someone who reads every single word of the Wall Street Journal. The paper has never been in better health and ruder form. I mean, the newsroom are knocking it out of the park every single day, whether it's merger and acquisition scoops, whether it's brilliant scoops about what the ins and outs of the White House. So, I mean, it may be that I've got some unhappy campers in the newsroom. It was ever thus, Andrew, and it's not Disneyland. But I think from the way that they are performing, the paper has never been better and the stories have never been more impactful.
Claudia, in a sense, we're dealing here with American exceptionalism. News organizations, I mean, and you're a global supplier of news. You supply to news organizations all over the world. Now, the main American news media is doing pretty well at the moment, and Mr. Trump has been good for business. That's true of the cable news channels. It's true of the quality newspapers. Not true, I think, of the tabloids, which haven't done so well, but it's been true of the New York Times, the Journal, the Post, CNN, MSNBC, and other news channels, Fox, of course, as well, which is another billion-dollar profit news organization. That's not true anywhere else in the world, is it? Sky News doesn't make money. France 24 doesn't make money. most news channels haven't got the resources, haven't got the revenue base that the Americans have.
I think that's right, and they don't have, the unique news event kind of that one has in terms of the campaign and the presidency. I think you're right. It's interesting to hear the optimism from people here who kind of, again, have a U.S. heart, I think, in terms of where you sit. If you talk to news organizations around the world, I think they feel they are struggling more in terms of what they're doing. Everyone's converging, right? If you think about, as you talked about, Deborah, the fact that, you are a broadcaster and you are now thinking about yourself digitally, and there's a convergence. Will, you've talked about the convergence for you in terms of digital and the newspaper. So everyone's kind of meeting in the middle, really, and what's happening is it's harder and harder to get that audience and to try to get people to come, and it's hard to get money behind that. So that's where everyone is struggling. Everyone needs to find content that is distinctive and that sets them apart, and to find their own voice. And so I think that's why we keep hearing, again, everyone's trying to think of what's the latest trend, how do you monetize news. So that's why everyone that we talk to, as I talk to customers of Reuters, it's to hear about, again, how do we get more video? How do we get more user-generated content? How do we get more infographics that can engage our consumers? So really, everyone wants more, and they want to find a way to be distinctive with it. And that is the challenge of most news organizations around the world, is they're trying to find a model, there are only very few companies that have been able to have great subscription models. Yours is one of them that have been successful with that. Most of the content out there is free, and that's a hard thing to monetize by definition.
Deborah, is it the job of a mainstream media organization, news organization, like all three of you here today, is it your primary purpose is to try to report the news as best and fairly and accurately as you can? Or is it also to call out fake news? Do you see it as your job to expose fake news? Or do you expose it simply by reporting the proper news? Which is it?
Well, I would say they're not mutually exclusive at all. It's not an either or. By doing the former, you do the latter. I think, we spoke about I spoke about two different types of fake news right at the beginning. I think if it's malign and political manipulation, absolutely, you have to call it out. And absolutely, and that comes from fact-checking and scrutiny and sometimes, obviously, investigative journalism.
But is there some fake news that you think it's so absurd, don't give it the oxygen of publicity? It's better just to leave it alone. Absolutely.
It's not, the term fake news does not fit all. I mean, absolutely. The clickbait boys from Veles in Macedonia that we showed, I mean...
Which is fascinating.
Yes, I mean, that's pernicious. They just sort of say, we don't care. And obviously, there's lots of discussion and debate to be had about how you, as I was saying, how and as you mentioned, Will, how platforms like Facebook and Google stop perpetuating that and amplifying it. But for me, personally, and certainly, our newsgathering teams, a blatant untruth from a government, because or calling out something that you know to be true because it's been thoroughly investigated and people are on the ground and there's absolute evidence for it. Maybe the details could be argued. That has to be called out, and that is our job. I mean,
do you agree with that, Will? Is that the job of the established media to call out fake news?
If it's political manipulation, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I think, look, I'd probably answer it like this, which is to say that our job is to provide our readers, members, with a fantastic news offering. When it's relevant to a Wall Street Journal reader for us to call out fake news, we would do that. But I suspect that the editor-in-chief, Jerry Baker, more often than not, ascribes his resource to actually doing news that's of more relevance to Wall Street Journal readers. That's not to say it's not important, but it's not probably our bag.
I would just say, if I could jump in, I think it is very important for media organisations. We had a situation recently. Claudia spoke about trust, and we speak about retaining our audiences and people in a confused world, turning to mainstream media or known brands or known or trusted brands to contextualise for them. I do think it's really important for every media organisation, when you are imitated and fake news goes out in your name, absolutely you have to shut it down really quickly. And I think the technology that's now available to you can't always trace the perpetrators, but
they can put it out in your brand, is what you're saying.
Yes, I mean, very recently in Nairobi, I was shown, Jonathan, who's here, I was sent a bulletin with a CNN logo and a genuine CNN background, and a completely never seen this woman presented before, broadcasting fake polling results in favour of Kenyatta. Just ahead of the election, and that is...
No, obviously you have to do that.
Well, yes, but I mean, but then there becomes the grey area, but that's dangerous to our journalists on the ground. Sure. It's, to the democratic process. So there's a scale, I suppose.
But one of the ways fake news, as Will said, there's always been fake news around. That's for sure. Way back to that supposed Soviet letter in the Daily Mail in the 1920s. The Zinoviev, I think it was. Someone will correct me. But one of the ways fake news has legs now is social media, which is everywhere and doesn't do the kind of tests that you all do, the kind of journalistic rigor that is brought to fact-checking. They don't do that. Now, Mr. Zucker, Deborah's ultimate boss at CN, he wants Facebook's feet held to the fire over its role in publishing Russian-supported fake news and adverts during the presidential campaign. He even accused it of, when it finally fessed up to what it was doing, announcing it in August, when everybody, of course, in Washington was gone. He said it's a huge issue. Facebook has not been transparent. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think Facebook's had a bit of a wake-up call, I think, during this process. I think, like the rest of the tech giants, they're beginning to understand that they can't have it both ways. They are either going to have to work out that they're media companies and all that goes with that, or whether they're tech companies and to back off. So the bit that's befuddling about it is that they have some of the cleverest people in the world. When you talk to them about adjusting their algorithms so that the fake news doesn't make an appearance or is very difficult to find, it becomes a task that is really quite impossible to achieve, and it's very, very difficult, and it will take years and years. And you say, well, how is that possible? Because you seem to be able to adjust the algorithm in all sorts of other ways rather rapidly. So I think they're on a journey. They're a bit like, dealing with them has been a bit like sort of dealing with people in shorts and sandals, kids, right? And they're growing up as they work out how difficult and challenging the media industry is. We're difficult buggers to work with, aren't we? That's what we do for a living. We're awkward. You're not meant to really like us. We're here to deliver news that sometimes causes offense to people, and that's what we do for a living. And that's quite tricky for these tech companies to deal with. So I do agree with it. I repeat, I'm going to be optimistic. I think that particularly Google and also signs at Facebook, they are beginning to get it. And even Facebook are beginning to talk about some sort of payment system which will reward...
Yeah, I know, that's fine for the Wall Street Journal and put more coins in your pocket, but that's not really the issue. The issue here is about news and about these social media giants spreading fake news, which you are all now having to spend a lot of time trying to counter it. And when you should be getting out to get the news and putting your resources on that, you're having to divert resources to try and counter this. Now, you say Facebook is getting it, but recently they said they had changed their algorithms to demote right-leaning items from their news feed, and then within a couple of days, they were permitting the posting of neo-Nazi material after Charlottesville.
Yeah.
So, in what way are they getting it?
Yeah, look, it's not for me to defend Facebook, but
you are.
I suspect the reason I think it is joined up, just to the point, is that not all news is equal, right? Some news is better than other news. And I have struggled for 10, 15 years with people you meet go, but all news is the same, isn't it? And it's all free on Google. Finally, I think in the last year, you're beginning to get from ordinary folk that they realise that not all news is equal. What we're hopeful that particularly Facebook and Google are beginning to digest and do something about is that actually some news is more important than others. So I don't think you'll ever make fake news go away. It's been around forever. I think, though, that what the answer, Andrew, in part lies in rewarding professional news better in these social media outlets. If you do that, and there's greater prominence, and the ecosystem is in our favour, in everyone here's favour, then good things will follow. It's not about the money, that's about moral purpose.
Well, let me ask Claudia this. Does Facebook or Google buy news from Reuters?
I don't usually comment on customers like that, but yes, we do provide them with some news.
But do they pay for it?
They do, yes.
Much?
I would love it to be more, let's put it that way. So I think it is one where they've, as Facebook talked about earlier today, where they seed. So I think, they've definitely done somewhere they consider seeding money to try something out like a Facebook Live. I think when there is a desire at times to own a space, to do something in a very global way or something very specific. But that's not their model. That's not what their business model is.
No, but if they were serious about news, they would be paying reputable news organizations like yours or doing a deal with CNN, which involved money as well. But it's clear from your hesitation they're not really.
They definitely are not providing us. They are not one of our major customers. They're a major partner of ours, though, I guess I would say. I think they are still important.
Free riding partner.
As one wants to reach an audience. I think where I have the optimism that Will has, I think, which is over time, one of their best ways to combat fake news and kind of how they approach it is to make it more visible what the sources are of the news, right? And to therefore also to provide link backs in a better way to some of our news sites where we can explain the stories. And so there are easy ways to be able to help the consumer know whether the news is credible or not. I think that's where things will shift over time, and that will be good for all trusted real news brands.
The reason, and I'm going to go to the audience in a minute, but the reason I'm labouring this point is because it takes me to the title of our session, The New Architecture of News. But actually, in terms of being able to afford the news, there isn't a new architecture. CNN is still, most of its revenues still come from carriage fees. You have changed your business model at Wall Street Journal more because you're getting subscription rather than advertising revenue. But it's not a new architecture. You could always get a sub to the Wall Street Journal. It's just become more important. Now, what was supposed to finance all of your journalism properly in the digital age was digital advertising. That digital advertising would rise, and that would help to pay for the collapse of print journalism. But it hasn't. CNN has some of those wonderful websites, but your digital revenues are very small. That's also true of the Wall Street Journal. 75 to 80% of that digital revenue has gone to Facebook and Google themselves, the people who are spreading all the fake news.
I think, can I make one point, which is I think that certainly in these discussions with Facebook and Google that various of us are having, that one option is that they do pay up for use of our content. Another option is that they put in place a dynamic paywall experience for those that want to be able to charge for their content. Another is that they give us more data so that we can understand the customers better. Still not giving us enough data. They know more about the people reading or watching our content than we do, and that's wrong. So there are all sorts of different ways that they could help us that will add up to money and being able to invest in journalism. So I think, could I just slightly disagree with you, which is that there isn't a new architecture yet, but there are real signs for the first time in years that a new way forward is emerging that could suit us all, albeit quite flexible. So this removal of this Neanderthal first-click free policy on Google to a situation where we can each choose the amount of free content we give is the first concrete sign, let's make sure it happens, that we are going to be treated as if it's our own content, which indeed it is.
Deborah, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm not a commercial executive. However, editorially, we have been working with Facebook for years, and with some great successes. It's an evolution, as Will says, and we have a contract for Facebook Lives, which we fulfill, which has provided us with great audience success and some of our reporters with great recognition.
Is there any revenue in it?
I can't speak to the revenue, honestly, Andrew. I can't speak to that. I know that the business deals, the talks that are going on with Facebook are ongoing, but we have experimented with them in a number of ways. I mean, we're engaged at the moment with a new show, CNN Talk, which is about, real-time audience engagement.
And that's on Facebook.
Conversation, and it's carried live on Facebook. I mean, it's an experiment, and at least they are willing to experiment in new ways of reaching an audience and engaging, and as Will said, giving you the audience feedback and the numbers we get from them we wouldn't otherwise have.
Yes.
I think that's really again, the analogy of what happened in the music industry, where it was a very difficult, turbulent time, hard to see paths to money, hard to see ways of of earning money, is that you have to experiment. One has to partner with people and know that there may not be short-term money, it might be longer term. Again, it's access to audience, it's thinking through with them. We all have a mission that we're trying to do. We all want to fund journalism, and so therefore it's finding ways together to do that and to, to work with all the platforms and to think about ways to do that. So I think it's about experiments, it's about looking for new approaches and giving some of them time. It's taken a long time for the music industry to rebound. Some would say it hasn't, but a lot of the players are doing quite well. A lot of the artists are doing well.
That's mainly because they do more events than ever.
It is. I think that's right.
Not from Spotify.
There's a journey that one has to go on, I guess I would say.
Let me ask Will this, because you're the Wall Street Journal. This is what I don't quite understand. If we are going to have a new architecture, it needs revenue.
Yeah.
And in the digital age, some of the revenues must surely be digital. But they're mainly going to Facebook and Google, which are not exactly in the cutting edge of use. Now, by 1895, the US railroads were in the grip of the Vanderbilts and about 2 other railroad companies. And they accounted for 70% of railroad freight revenues. It was a freight issue. So Teddy Roosevelt trust-bust the railways. Facebook and Google are close to 80% of digital revenues, and no one has touched them. Why?
I think because a couple of reasons. One is that they have spent an enormous amount on lobbying in DC. Facebook, I think, is the #1 spender on lobbying in DC. I think, secondly, a lot of the people in our industry did a very poor job at exposing it. A lot of people are scared of them and stood back as they came and marched in and took all of the digital advertising. I think for those 2 reasons. But what's happening now is the stars are aligning for these companies to either make some changes or face the consequences. And I think if
there's a different mood in Washington.
There really is, and it's not on the stuff we're talking about.
No.
There's this particularly difficult case, Ted Cruz case, that I think is really igniting, particularly Republicans. So I throw in Amazon as well. I do think if they don't make some profound changes, that there will be consequences.
Let me get some questions from the audience. If we can put up the lights a little bit. Yes, a gentleman down there. Keep your hand up, we'll get a microphone. Let me see another hand, we'll get a mic. And there's a gentleman over there too. Keep your hand up. Yes, sir.
Hi there. We've talked a lot about fake news, but if you take something like genuine breaking news, like trying to find out if there's been another terrorist incident in the city that you live. Have you guys lost out on one of your major remits, which is telling me something as quickly as I should know it? Because our primary news source for that sort of incident now is probably Twitter. So I just wanted to know, has that remit of bringing me news first been overtaken now by Twitter? So is Twitter a friend of yours or a foe?
Deborah.
I'd say absolutely breaking news is at our core. It's our core offering of ours. And Twitter can be it's a great tip-off, and it can be a great source of video and photos and, eyewitness in the first instances of breaking news and the continuum. But absolutely not. We won, I think, the very first RTS award for breaking news for Paris. We sent 135 people. What we had was, absolutely every angle that you could possibly want covered, I would hope. I mean, on Twitter, people might hear of an event there, but it's like a mosquito skimming a pond, and it's been shown that they then actually turn to us for the for all the detail and the context and the facts and the maps and the locations, and you may be able to get that episodically if you go searching across social media, but then you've got plurality, you've got depth, you've got discussion, you've got comparison, contextualization. We tend to, but we're a machine when it comes to breaking news. We swarm. It's configured in a formulaic way.
Well, it's in your DNA.
Everybody knows exactly what they have to do. It's monstered, and I would absolutely not.
Let me put a different point coming out of the interesting question from the gentleman there to Claudia, and it's coming at it from the opposite angle. Deborah mentioned that CNN needed to get faster. You also mentioned speed. Let me just ask you to react to this, though. If we're now in a world of fake news, and mainstream organizations like yourselves want to be arbiters of that and call it to account and have the best standards yourself, perhaps speed is not as important as getting it right. Maybe that should be more important. Being accurate should be more important than being first.
We absolutely want to be first and accurate. So that's how we think about it, right? So that's our goal, is to make sure that we break the news, because we have the world's news organizations in 115 countries depending on us.
But we want to get it correct. We want to make
it has to be accurate.
The pressure to be first can make you inaccurate.
And we continue to make sure that we are accurate, because no one wants to have to retract something. So in fact, we actually, in terms of Twitter, we analyze social media using some, it's called Reuters Tracer, which does some kind of natural, kind of machine learning algorithms to quickly verify, is that a terrorist attack? And so to be able to look at all the tweets and all the things that are coming out to verify, is that real? And then, again, we still swarm it as well, so we kind of send people in, because you can't do it all from Twitter. So I think it is knowing how to use tools like that to help make sure that you can be fast and accurate.
All right, we'd all like to be that. Gentleman there.
Yeah, my question to the panel is, who would decide the corruption or who's right and wrong in the media industry? For instance, the WMD thing in Iraq, where the global media was reporting one thing and turned out to be another. Who's right in Syria, Russian TV, or the rest of the media? Who's right, who's putting up the fake news in Qatar, Al Jazeera, or the rest of the GCC media?
Oh, who do you think?
I don't know. It's the perspective.
Do I. How do you think they should know? Who would you trust first, Russia Today or CNN?
I don't know whom to trust, because both are giving totally different perspectives. Who's right?
I would trust CNN.
All right.
Why wouldn't you? Russia Today is a Kremlin front.
Well, let's raise hands. Who believes in Russian TV or CNN?
All right. Who would trust Russia Today rather than CNN? Raise your hands.
Or Al Jazeera for that reason.
No, hold on. Don't complicate it just because it's not going well for you. Who would trust CNN rather than Russia Today?
Oh, thank you.
I think I'll rest my case. Deborah, I hope the check's in the post. Let's have another question. Yes, down here. And a young man sprawled over the seat there.
Sorry?
Just keep your hand up if you can muster the energy. Yes.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear from the panel. I mean, it sounds as though everything's going really well for you all. Revenue's great. The performance of your businesses is great. Is it now the time, and can you imagine that this is the right time to be able to take all your editorial toys away from social platforms that you don't own and just keep your content in the world that you control?
Will, interesting.
Yeah.
What'd you say? Probably not realistic?
No. I think we are in a state of play where my 2.1 million line followers, my 6 million Facebook followers, our 7 million Apple followers, even our 160,000 users on Messenger who followed the eclipse on Messenger because that was how they wanted to do it. I'm in a world where I've got to put my content where they want to access it. And if they want to access it in video, audio, text, or a hybrid, it's a world, because it's so competitive, where I've got to play in that game. So I think the days have gone where I can simply say, it's come to my platform or sod off. That was the print industry, and that's why we got it so wrong and we almost died,
yes.
right? You couldn't find a newspaper because unless you got up early enough in central London or any city, major city around the world, because we got fat and lazy on the profits that it then evaporated. So we have had to go through a complete mindset change where we are now trying to be the most customer responsive, obsessive media company in the world. And I'm, for a fair price, want to give you our content where you want it and how you want it.
I would also just remind you of this American exceptionalism. You know, most other news organizations outside of America are not rolling in BBC rolling news has been cut back. Sky News loses money. France 24 operates on a shoestring. Deutsche Welle.
I think that's right. I think around the world there's still a lot of challenges in the news world, and it's a tough market. Everyone's competing to be the best, but there definitely is pressure for resources. People are cutting back. So I think this isn't the time in a way to say, let's put it back on a CD and only sell it on a CD.
CD-ROMs.
What's a CD? Yeah. Yes, sir.
I'm curious now, having mentioned the kind of be the first and be the most accurate. I mean, and considering that the feeds are coming up so quickly, how much time do you think you have before you can break a story before it becomes irrelevant nowadays?
Who would like to? Could you just say that? How much time?
How much time in terms of kind of breaking news, urgent news, do you think people have, or the audience has moved on?
Well, shall I start?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, no, go for it.
Well, I mean, I think there is. We have a graph that shows the time value of a story. It definitely has changed, but which is why we talk about story ownership. So if you're going to do it big, do it across all platforms in all ways, and max out on it. And then particularly if it's a story that's core to your readers, you know, if it's a story about Tesla or Uber, we have to be first, and it has to be available to Wall Street Journal readers first. So you've really then got to go with it, because it then... Now, interestingly, at the same time as saying it's got shorter, there is actually now a much longer tail to content. So there are all sorts of now different ways that we try and extract further value to invest back in our journalism from our content by putting it, for example, in our content pool so that data scientists can use it forevermore. So the curve has got flatter. Does that make sense? Yeah.
And I think it's a little bit also about thinking through back to what the relevance is for your audience, and thinking through, so for where we do news for finance professionals, again, they're going to want to understand the different nuances of that particular story and think about what, the hurricane will mean for refineries. So it all depends on what the angle is. And so yes, you want to be first with the thing that is news breaking. We all want exclusive, so we're all working hard to do that and to get the best news. I think, though, it is people want to understand why and kind of want more context on an ongoing basis.
And can I just add to that, because there's two specific ways, which is I completely agree. There is a real trend towards verticals. People are prepared to pay more money for every single little bit of information about central bankers around the world in a way that perhaps they weren't before, and they're prepared to give extra. And also people want to convene to talk about journalism much more than we've been used to. So this concept of live journalism, what we used to call conferences, where people convene to have conversations about journalism, is a really strong trend. So those are, which are adding extra value to the original content, but you've got to be first.
Let me just squeeze in another couple of questions, if I may, because I have to end. There's a gentleman there. Anybody over there?
Yeah, hi, I'm Fabian from
and then the gentleman down the front. So two very quickly.
Okay. I have a quick question about the role of data, and obviously I think many of you may have read the articles about the role of Cambridge Analytica and the way sort of a lot of campaigns are using data algorithm to preemptively plant and seed stories that are likely to resonate. Obviously, in the world of entertainment, that strategy is largely being used to kind of curate content and anticipate what the audience might need. Obviously, in the world of news, there's a conflict of interest. You don't want to make news, you want to comment on news and find news. But I'm curious sort of what is the role of data, because I think you're going to be competing with a very powerful force that can plant seeds very skillfully using data, similar to how it's being used in the financial industry.
Who would you like to answer that? You've only got one choice.
Anybody.
Anybody? It's such a good question. You better nominate somebody.
I'm going to nominate CNN.
Oh, okay.
Well, sorry, Deborah.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a really good question. Every news organization is using different data analysis tools, and it's an exceptional tool, but you know, that sounds to me like a question at the beginning of the social media conversation. You know, at the beginning, is this going to be good? Is it going to kill us? Is it going to cure us? Same with data analysis. Right now, I think it's phenomenally useful, especially CNN International, for example. We don't have ratings, and a lot of the feedback we get and audience research comes from the data from digital. It's phenomenal. We were talking about Facebook earlier, and that CNN talk show, we learned from them that we get 1 million to engage in the show because it gives us a point of reference. But I mean, it's kind of like, I probably shouldn't say this, but it's kind of like nuclear energy, isn't it? You know, it could save the world or destroy it. It depends whose hand it's in and who's using it and how. But I think it's a phenomenally interesting area. Are there conflicts? Of course. I mean, there are conflicts all around for an international news organization because you're dealing with different markets at different dates and different time zones. But you can take, some overarching lessons from data. You don't necessarily have to apply
I think it's interesting. I hadn't thought of that interesting point because with the CNN International, like BBC World, you haven't got Nielsen ratings.
No, we don't.
So social media gives you a better idea of who's there. Final question from the gentleman down here. Nice and short.
Okay, thank you. I would like to know the panel views on two issues. First one is the ownership of the news channel or news network. Does it reflect on its credibility? And the second issue is the social media. Did it help more fake news to spread or more factual news to spread on the balance?
I think that last question is almost impossible to answer, isn't it? I mean, social media has allowed fake news to spread, but it also allows all of you to reach more people than ever before. How you could do the arithmetic, you probably have to speak to Google to get the algorithm.
And I think it has, though, I mean, I think on the positive, it has made it so that people are consuming more news. Some of it is fake. Now, though, it's also creating more of a conversation. So just, a conversation around what is trusted journalism. I do think that's a good thing for the industry, right? It has to be good that we're having these panels, that we're having this conversation. It's because more people are seeing news. They're trying to understand, is it accurate or is it not? I think that's good for society.
Can I just clarify, your point on ownership is, does ownership of a news channel?
Yeah, of a news channel, because you asked the question, which is more credible, CNN or Russia Today?
Today.
Is that to do partly because of the ownership of the two, or is it because
it's a good question, but I suppose, Deborah, there are owners and there are owners. I mean, BBC News is, it's not government-owned, but it's a public service. I would suggest that France 24, although owned by the government, is rather different from Russia Today, which is owned by the government.
Yes, I think well, I would hope it comes down to our content and our journalism, but as well, we're currently owned by Time Warner, which is the biggest storyteller and biggest in the world. I mean, they believe in storytelling at every level through every company they own, and that's after all what we do, at the heart of what we do. And we may or may not be about to be taken over by AT&T, but that would... Which
could make coverage of telecom stories interesting.
Well, no, but I mean, to the earlier gentleman's point, you know, they're a data company as well, so I'm hoping that the data and analysis will have at our fingertips.
Oh, so there's a deal to be done. All right.
Will be great.
We better leave it there. We're coming to the end of our time. These are huge issues, and they don't go away, but I think it's been a fascinating discussion. And that's been made possible because we had such a superb, well-informed and prestigious panel. Please thank them in the usual way.
Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew.